So just to kind of start at the beginning, in honor of the set and setting, what intention do you have for this? For the resurrection of the podcast, since it's been a while, since the last one.
Yeah, true. So my intention for the podcast is to have a bit more meaningful conversations, to dive a bit deeper, like you just said in the before we started recording. We don't have as much workshop call presence anymore in like back in the days. So when we started, I was joining every workshop, and it was so much fun to hear all the stories of all the people every week and those kind of things. But along the way, we have really been focusing on building a lot of other things around the company, right? So, for example, right now we are building the microdose course with Jai, which will be live in a few. Actually, it will be live this week when we record this. It will be live, so that's cool. We have launched the microdosing app, the Sweet Spot app. We can also link that here and below, of course. So that one is live. We are working on a lot of things, behind the scenes, new products, new yeah, some things I cannot share too much about yet, but we're doing a lot of things around Microdose Pro, not so much in front of the screen. And basically, I and Jai, we recorded 2 podcasts when we just got started. So this was in back in 2020. That was, and they're still, they have a lot of views there, and there's a lot of feedback, and people still DM us that they really loved it. Also, that some people thought that we were high during the podcast, which I can I can confirm, which was not the case, I believe. So yeah, people asked if we could do some of more of those things again, and then you also got more involved, and you also wanted to share your message, spread the message a little bit more. So I thought, let's just turn on the camera and have a chat again and see what we're going to talk about. Like, I have no set agenda or like topics for this recording for this podcast, so I just want to just riff a little bit, see what's going on at your end of Microdose Pro. You're of course more involved in the coaching part. Maybe you can check a little bit what's going on at our end. But yeah, I noticed that we have these chats with the team, or just the two of us, and we're just like going free floating for hours and brainstorming. And these are actually quite valuable calls, I think, and also for the community that could really help. So that would be my main intention for the podcast. What's yours?
No, it's the same. It really is community, and I don't use that word sparingly, as I find sometimes it's just a throwaway word now. I've seen a major brand actually repurpose community as personal branding, which I find quite personally offensive. And so, based on that personal value of mine, I'm very engaged, as you know, on a one-to-one level, in the groups, in the calls. I really, it matters to me, and it matters not only on an individual basis, because I want people to know how to use these substances properly, but also for the ultimate um, journey of the psychedelic renaissance. It's like, what are we, garbage in, garbage out? What are we putting in? How are we teaching others so that it doesn't backfire on us and then something really goes pear-shaped? And it's like I mentioned previously, there's a great quote that says, the soft bigotry of low expectation. And that means, don't patronize people. And I don't want to patronize people. I really want to give them all the information that we have, including reminding them that we don't know very much. We all need to stay humble. And so these conversations hopefully are not only a window into your minds, and hopefully we'll have the other founders, Kai and Gino, with us, and Jai, of course. But you guys are interesting people, and it takes interesting people to pioneer and start companies like this early on, as you did 3.5 years ago. And so I think people really want to know more about what makes you guys tick. And it's a great opportunity to plant questions in people's minds and really make them consider how to use this substance and what protocols to use that would really benefit them the most.
Yeah,
So that
agreed. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that's it's a great intention as well. And just maybe for context, right? Because we're dropping a lot of things here already. Like you said, there are three founders of the team. That's me, Gino, and Guy. Then we got Jai on board. He's a neuropsychologist. He's now taking care of the coaching and the research department of things. And then you also joined our team. I think already in the beginning, right? Like the first year, I think that was.
Yeah. Not far after the first year. Yeah, a few months in.
Yeah. So we met in 2020 in Cape Town, South Africa. And I thought, okay, we need to do some stuff here. We need to work together. Maybe you can just for the listeners, because you send a lot of emails through throughout our email channels with a lot of educational stuff. But maybe you can briefly just share a little bit of like what your background is, what you do at Microdose Pro, and how you got involved in the whole thing.
Oh my word. Okay. So, what do I do? So, I have one of those really long-winded three title kind of multiple hat roles. So, it's community manager. So, I run the Facebook group and the Discord channel, and I also write content for both Microdose Pro and Human Pro, our sister company. And I'm also a microdosing coach. Now, what brought me into this area of my life after multiple careers, I've worked in many industries. um, and what brought me here was basically trying to find my own wellness after a medical professional messed it up. And that is a very high end dentist that put fillings in my mouth. And I ended up with heavy metal poisoning, mercury, and lead in my system, and all the consequences of that. And then I went to another dentist that made it worse. And then I decided that that was enough. And that's been, my entire adult life, so it's been over 25 years that I've been trying to cure this thing. And with heavy metals, they get buried in your vital organs and can affect your cognition, affects digestion, affects the skin, affects your thyroid and energy levels. I mean, it's just such a sweeping consequence that I ended up doing anything and everything at least twice. And that means, like Vipassana retreats or macro doses or microdoses or Ayurveda or, sweat lodge. I mean, you name it. And I just became everybody's kind of go-to person for all things wellness that actually work, that isn't bound by conventional medicine and conventional opinions. And so when we met, friends of mine just happened to ask me if I could get my hands on some lion's mane. And I happened to have access to lion's mane because I run in those circles, and I'm so committed to the quality of the product. And that was a very high quality extract that I was really proud to help people give access to. And that's how we met. And then one thing led to another, and I convinced you guys to let me write because because I have a lot to say. And
Yeah,
so here we are. Now you kind of just push me to talk to the community, so I don't talk to you guys as much, which is great. It's a win-win situation.
that definitely is. I think when we met, indeed, like so. Just for some clarification, when we started Microdose Pro, like we started really for the microdosing angle. So we were not so much after the lion's mane and those kind of things yet. But you really introduced us to a whole new world there of like functional mushrooms, right? And every day we're having chats on Slack and on Discord, and I'm also learning so much there. So this is also for me, this is a whole new just area of exploration is it's opening there, and that's so interesting. And it's you're a little bit have become like the oracle within Microdose Pro, right? so, so you're like, not
Yes,
to have like the matrix analogies, but then there's some
Asha man. Yes, thank you.
the Asha man, but there's always some questions in support like every day, and we have just no clue, right? And it's like, oh well, saffron or something, right? Like it's always a new thing that for me is new because I'm not so much into that that botanical world. And then yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you have a protocol for this, or yeah, you know what it is. And it's like, oh wow, it's amazing to learn that there are so many just new areas of just discovery also within the whole microdosing landscape. So that's just amazing, I think.
And that's really my area of expertise, not necessarily out of um, talent, but more out of compulsion. I can't help myself. I cannot help myself. I'm such a curious person. And I've been exposed to so many different cultures in my life and so many different places and so many things I've had to adapt to that now my sensory purview, my horizon is just different. And so I scan such a massive landscape. And because I scan that massive landscape, I'll come up with all kinds of theories, which I'm sure we'll get to. Theories and opinions, completely uneducated and unfounded, but intriguing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So you will get to it. Let's just go there. Like we have no set program for this podcast. So uh, we were talking the other day on Slack about neuroplasticity,
yeah.
and you had some very interesting views on that. So maybe we can dive a bit into that, because I'm still trying to grapple what you exactly meant by it. So you were making some connection between neuroplasticity and between your habits in life, and how that look like. So maybe you can linger a little bit on that.
Okay. So, what does neuroplasticity, this word that we hear so often, and we hear like about these cognitive experiments and scientific studies that they perform, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And you move on. But what does it actually mean in real terms in your day to day life? Okay, that's really cool. Sounds great. Please, can I have some? But then what does that look like in my life? So, a case sample would be often we have people that are dealing with a lot high anxiety that come to microdosing to reduce their anxiety and possibly manage ADHD symptoms. Now, either of those will make someone feel very uncomfortable at a dinner party invitation. And so when they actually have to go to a dinner party invitation, a person like that might drink too much to self-soothe and to kind of cope. And, they say an inappropriate thing, they get home too late, the weekend's shot, and then you really, really regret the whole thing. When we microdose, what we're hearing and what we experience as individuals as well is that the invitation doesn't make us so nauseous in the first place, and we accept with less resistance. We go to the dinner party, we actually engage with people, so we're more relaxed and we can actually have a conversation. We don't drink as much, so we don't have 9 drinks to cope. We have maybe 2 and actually some water. Yes, it's possible. And we're not doing it from a place of willpower. We hear this a lot. You just don't want more than 2 or 3. You go home at a reasonable hour, and then your weekend is not shot to shit, and you can actually wake up at a decent time on your Saturday, go for a run, go to the market and buy yourself some fresh produce, and actually have a great weekend. Now, you do that enough times, you realize, oh, I've done that 3 times this week. I went for that run. Oh, I've been running 3 times a week for the last 4 weeks. Oh, even though I stopped microdosing, I can now do a 10K run or whatever it is. Pick your poison as to what you want to include in your life. But there's a really interesting mechanism of neuroplasticity where it not only reduces the urge and the impulse to self-soothe with habits that we know we need to let go of, but it also reduces the resistance to do the things we know we should be doing. And that includes, sometimes it includes even as an appetite, not suppressant, but appetite modulator. I mean, we've seen this in our community. People say, I just don't eat as much. I'm in my body, I eat as much as I like, and it happens to be considerably less than what I used to. So I'm not
Hmm.
self-soothing with food. I'm just using food as its intended purpose. And so that's what neuroplasticity feels like to me, is that you literally slowly and incrementally, day by day, just become different. The hard
Okay.
stuff isn't so hard to let go of. The hard stuff to do isn't so hard to engage in. And then you start pulling these levers and you have like a really nice self-sustaining upward cycle of positive behaviors. And then of course, if you're running 3 times a week and you've done it for 4 weeks, you believe in yourself more, you're not lying to yourself about running anymore because you're actually doing it, you're a nicer person, you don't mind asking for that promotion. The domino effect is profound.
Yes. So if I understand correctly, and it starts to make more sense to me, like, of course, we read all these studies and we see all these hypotheses about neuroplasticity and how psychedelics and perhaps even microdosing might help to promote neuroplasticity. And for me, this is always it's an interesting concept, and Jai also often speaks about this. He also loves this. But what you're basically saying is like this is just how neuroplasticity looks like in everyday life. So okay, I'm starting to understand that. It's of course I think it's interesting hypotheses. I'm not sure if you can prove that it's actually neuroplasticity, but it's like this would be like it's in an idealist sense. It's like it's just how things are presented to you that are under the hood. So perhaps something is happening in the brain we don't know yet. There's all this speculation about it, but how that translates itself into actual reality, that is just what you just described. It's that behavior change in there. Well, that's very interesting.
Well, I mean, that's the link with PTSD, right? So it's like, well, when something used to freak me out and switch on my amygdala doesn't freak me out the same way, there's a rewiring. That Huberman podcast on psilocybin, I listened to it again, the one that he released last month. And they talked about that study they did with music. When music, a certain piece of music um, was interpreted in the brain through scans as melancholy or sad or whatever. And then they gave them some psilocybin. And then long after the psilocybin dose, they made them listen to that same piece of music, and it triggered different areas of the brain which were relaxing and love and a sense of ease. So it wasn't nearly as sad or as kind of depressing as it was initially. So there's a rewiring there, and there is something even deeper under that. There's something about psilocybin that makes us feel like the universe has our back. And this is where I go woo. This is where I go woo. But there really is something about, and that's why people say, "Oh, I felt this unbelievable sense of love when you're macrodosing." Or when you're microdosing, it's just like, oh, I just feel more in my body, and I love being out in nature, and it's just soothing, and I feel gratitude. There's just something that happens that we default more towards being safe and being loved in the mycelium. What that is, we don't have the tools for. We're not even asking the question. But it has to be there because that's why we're going there. And that's why we've stayed there. And that's why this topic has been ongoing for as long as it's been ongoing and not going away, but just building in interest. There has to be.
Partially agreed with that. Also, I think it's very good for the listeners to be aware that we just completely go confrontational with our discussions, just to also to check our own belief system. So I'm gonna also
That's why
challenge.
I do it to you because
Yeah,
I know
exactly.
you're on the opposite end. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I see you right there. I'm going to poke you right in that.
great. They keep poking. So yeah, just that the listeners are aware of that. To hook into that, okay, yeah, you say that's where I go woo, and of course I think there's nothing wrong with woo. I'm also at times I'm pretty far out on the woo end of the spectrum. um but you also mentioned in there Huberman, and that is basically the other end of the spectrum. That is like completely not woo. That's full on science, right? And
Yes.
it's this is kind of the dynamic that we're in right now, and I feel there's a very thin line that we are walking. Is because at the one end you have the, let's say, full woo, and at the other hand you have full hardcore clinical Western science, right? And it's very interesting to me to see that these two are in a way merging. And in a sense, what's happening is that the Western side of things, the full on science side of things, it's now really integrating psychedelics and taking that over. But for everything in there, there is always like a hardcore sensory explanation, right? So in the case of there's this new studies now that show that psychedelics might be up to 1,000-fold more binding to certain receptors than classic SSRIs, those kind of things. So that's all from that angle, right? But what I see you and what you allude to in your argument is a little bit the other side. It's woo. It's like the deeper subjective experience of things. And for me, this is very interesting because also at Microdose Pro, we definitely see a very clear line between the two camps. I don't want to say, but between the two groups, the one group really does it for, let's say, neurological optimization. So they really go for the Stamets stack, and they really go for, okay, I want to induce neurogenesis because I read an article on that, and I think that, or I saw a video of Stamets on that, and I think that is the way to go. On the other hand, you really see like the group that does it for a subjective reason. They want to feel more in tune with themselves, right? And that for me is so fascinating to just to explore that, but also to address those two groups. And what I hear you say, it's your for me, it's alluding more to the latter, right? It's more to like feeling in tune with yourself, and I also think that's your message. It's self empowerment, it's self agency, it's trying what works. Am I correct when I frame you like that, or no?
You're right, and I'm not saying there's no value in productivity and focus and all that. I'm just saying you get to have that and more.
Okay,
So you
what
get
do you
to
mean by
have
that?
you get to have your sense of felt presence. You get to have a more embodied sense of gratitude and awe in your life and be more focused. You get to like not be depressed and being more productive. You can have both with entheogens on a microdose level.
Okay, this is very interesting. So bold claims again, Asha, very bold claims. So I'm going to also, as a microdose company founder, I'm going to challenge a little bit.
Go for it.
Uh, so first of all, okay, you say entheogens. Like I'm not a I love the word, but I think when it comes to microdosing, entheogen literally means like the god within to like ignite that experience. Like I think that's a bit too extreme when it comes to
Okay, fine.
microdosing.
Okay.
So first point there. Then you say you can have both. That made me think because the reason why I got into microdosing initially was not because of both. It was not because I wanted to have that inner subjective experience or that encounter with non-ordinary states of consciousness or the numinous or whatever it's called. That was for me the domain of the high dose experience. That's where I went for into yurts in the forest and whatever to to have that experience to really to go into that mode of being. But for me, the microdosing aspect, I just started 5 6 years ago because I read some articles about Silicon Valley engineers, founders, creatives doing microdosing for creative and productivity reasons, and that for me was microdosing. So I never went in the beginning for, okay, let's find this tuning in with myself, let's find a deeper sense of purpose or meaning. No, that was not really my aim with that. But when we started Microdose Pro, and again, we started with this idea for productivity, for creativity, for achieving your flow state, because that's what we as the three founders use it for. When we started that, that was the whole branding idea, the whole angle was only focused on that. And then after a few months, when people they start wrapping up their first protocol, we saw the reviews coming in, and it was only 10% about focus, right? And the other 90% was all about I felt so good, and I'm more in tune with myself again, and thank you guys that you exist because I found purpose again in life. It- like literally that intensity, and I was reading that even handwritten letters, and I was like, is this serious? This cannot be true. I even didn't believe it at first. I thought this must be a placebo because that is the domain of the high dose experience. That is not the domain of microdosing. And
Mhm.
I even had a debate with my co-founders on this. I'm not sure if this is true. I think this must be placebo, right? I think that like, it's such incredible problems that we're solving with microdosing. I'm not sure about it. But then the reviews they kept coming in, and then my co-founder Gino, he's really into validation and into growth and into how can you validate if you have product market fit, those kind of like startup questions. He said we need to start interviewing every single person that orders from us, and we started doing that, and just the feedback we got from that was just so insane that when I was reading that and I was seeing those interviews, I was like, okay, I'm convinced. I have to check my own internal biases and my belief system, because this clearly needs an iteration right here, because microdosing clearly helps in a certain way to feel that more centered feeling, to have that inner awareness of, okay, I am indeed now upgrading my own being, my own system, or in a way I'm just feeling better, that sense. And when I started just thinking about that myself, I realized, in a way, that's what I did when I was using microdosing for flow states, for productivity. But I
Mhm.
just channeled that energy of that more centered feeling into focus, into, okay, let's go write for a few hours, or let's just work on this one project for an entire day. For me, that was kind of like the how I transmuted that energy. But of course, you can also like direct that energy into other areas of your life, into just feeling better, and just be more in tune. And that kind of opened a whole whole new portals for me. And I thought, wow, this is just beyond amazing. It's so cool that we found by accident this huge problem that we're actually solving, right? That's for an entrepreneur, that's just amazing. Anyway, very long story, but I think what you're saying, I agree with that, because it's just this internal alignment with yourself, and that allows for different use cases, for different benefits. I think that's the gist of what you're saying, correct?
It is the gist of what I'm saying, and even even though you didn't intend to use microdosing for the woo reasons or the more felt sense reasons, is it fair to assume that over the years you got here anyway? Or how do you know what I mean? Did it kind of like morph into that? Are you feeling yourself as a different person, um, with different motivations and intentions for microdosing than you did in the beginning? Like, how has your personal
Oh,
experience with microdosing been?
this gets interesting. Like, I think just my personal motivations have changed a lot. Regardless, I'm not sure if it is due to microdosing alone. I think just microdosing is just maybe like 5% of that equation. But when I started, like after my master's, to have my own company, my own reason, the only reason was I don't want to work for anyone. like
Mhm.
I just cannot deal with authority. Also, my inner struggle right there. I had a lot of things to work with. That was where the high dose came in, right? For all those issues. Um, and in the beginning, it was just, I had nothing, and I just need to work 24/7 to just, to become something, to really let the ego sense. And that changed along the years. The last 5 years really like changed. Okay, I want to do something that is more meaningful and that I actually enjoy doing, and something that I don't wake up and I think like I have to grind today, right? That mentality, which was very good to have for a while, to know that sensation, that state of consciousness. But it's like that is a regression from where I think I am now. Does microdosing, has that helped? In a way, it helped with the integrational aspect of it, because I think we also talked about this before, but we both have done our fair share of high dose psychedelic journeys, and that can be extremely intense. But if you're then dropped back into default Western society, that's quite a shock, right? So you have this intense insights or experience, and then the integration aspect is 100% the hardest part of that, because you just taste it for a while, like a higher state of being, and now you're back, right? And that's like, okay, what, how the hell am I going to implement that into my daily life? And I think that is where microdosing helped me a lot, in the way that it doesn't blast you into that state, but it's on a very small sense. It kind of like it brings you inward for me a little bit, and it centers you more, and it gives you more a mindful state of being. And for me, that is in a way, it's an alignment to that deeper truth. That for me is microdosing. And so it's more a tool that helped me along the way. But I also always say is like, yeah, microdosing is just a tool, right? It's just like, you do it for a few months, and if it helps you, great. But then if the method has worked, you drop the method and maybe pick it up after a few months again. But if it then works again, fine. But if it doesn't work for you, don't use that method. So that is more my approach toward the whole just concept of microdosing.
Yeah, and that's, I understand that people are curious about the macrodose and, peeking behind door number two. I mean, we're all guilty of it. We all did it. And I get that and I get the urgency, but I really want to communicate to people that, you can drink from the fire hose or just get a cup of water. Like, you know what I mean? One of them might be more fun, but you can also blow your face off. Like it's a lot, taking big doses is a lot. It requires preparation. It really, really does. You really need to be mindful of who you surround yourself with, what environment you're in, what personal baggage you're coming in with, whether it's something on your mind or whether you're on medication. All of that is really, really valuable and important to consider before then. And then, of course, there's the experience, which is like 6 hours ish. And then, that's the part when I've never skydived, but that's the part where you're kind of like floating in air and you're like, "Ooh, this is fun." Okay, well, after that 6 hour hero dose, you need to figure out how to land. You need to figure out how to tuck and roll and not break your legs on the way down, and in the cases where you have traveled to an international destination, to a yurt in a forest and done the thing, while you're on the flight home, you're putting yourself under all this pressure because you've decided you're now a new person and you've seen the light and you're completely emancipated and enlightened, and you get off the airplane and it's Monday morning and it's the Western world and you're like, how am I going to do this? And I put pressure on myself, and I put my self-worth on the line, and people are going to expect this from me. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so what I'm saying is there's an alternative, and the microdosing means you get to decide. You get to not need a sitter. You get to not pay 3,500 euros. You get, you know, like there's so many benefits. You get to do it slowly. You get to stop when you're ready. You get to integrate on a day-to-day basis because you're only dosing 2, maybe 3 times a week, no more. And a cycle is 6 to 8 weeks, and you take a month break, a 2 to 4 week break. Maybe you have a second cycle and then you're done. Maybe you don't have a second cycle. It's really um, not like conventional medicine. And it really invites us to really understand medicine in a different way because it's a completely different type of medicine. But to have so much personal control, and you get a chance to catch your breath when you're microdosing. You get a chance to not be completely thrown off the treadmill of life and just learn how to run, and that's so valuable in so many ways. If and when you're ready and you found someone that you can trust and you have a good environment and you have the opportunity for a hero dose, that is just a different conversation. It's a valuable conversation, but that is just a separate experience completely.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And I even would go as far as to say that I don't think that everyone needs that experience at all. Not to be a gatekeeper in any way, but I do believe that you have to be ready for that. And as a society, like from a principle perspective, I am for individual freedom. So that opportunity, that possibility should be there. I'm very firm believer of that aspect. So if you want to do that, if you're ready to do that, and if you have gone through the, how do you say this, the test or the screening, whatever, then I think okay, fine. But the sentiment right now, it's becoming a bit in the groups that I'm in. Oh, everyone just should do high dose of LSD or psilocybin or any psychedelic because then they will get to a high level and that will be good for a society. And I just think that we've tried that already in the 60s, right? That was kind of the Timothy Leary approach with just put tap water in the, or put the acid in the tap water. So that is not the way I think it should be done, because the high dose really opens you up to a extremely powerful experience, and that you need to be able to contain that as an individual. That is just it's obvious to me to see that, but we should be striving towards a society where that opportunity is available. That is my position on that. But even if it means that only 5% of society would go for it, That would be my main, let's say, ideal scenario. But I don't think that you want to get 50% plus of society on this on that experience. I don't think that's a healthy dynamic.
Number one, we developed tolerance of LSD very quickly, so I don't know how the tap water would work because
Cool.
a lot of LSD.
Fine, fair enough.
Right? Um, and also, like, look, it's a non-ordinary state. When you're taking a large dose, it's a non-ordinary state, right? So there's like being sober and being not sober. Now, as much as we love LSD and psilocybin, it's still a non-ordinary state. And if you're always trying to not be where you are, at the risk of sounding woo, it's not sustainable. But back to my theory around neuronal density and neuronal infrastructure that you get to keep through psilocybin and arguably LSD as well, like, you get to keep that. Those little upgrades get to become your ordinary state. That becomes your baseline. And so you don't need the non-ordinary state. It's fun, but there's a risk. And you don't know how you're going to handle it. People think they know, but you just don't know. And again, it's really important, the space that you're in. You really need to, like, we can't say this enough. And I think, look, you know how I feel when it comes to clinical trials. I love them. They have their place, they have their value. But like Huberman discussed in his podcast, they extract the psilocin and they synthesize it. And sometimes you take it in a capsule and you have it on an IV drip for the clinical study. And then you're in a room with two people there that are like giving you the Freudian eyebrow with their clipboard. There's not a plant in the entire building. And okay, maybe they'll give you an eye mask and some Johns Hopkins music, but you're going into like the deepest, darkest part of your soul in such a neutered environment, in such an extracted and decomposed environment, that I just think like it loses so much in that clinical aspect. And I understand that they need to like check the dosage and make sure that everything is, but under the premise that there's so much that we don't know, except we know that we're drawn to them. We know that we're drawn to them, and the higher the dose, the more open we are. And that's just fact. And that's why set and setting is important. And that's why preparation is important. And that's why you need someone, at least a sitter, that you can empathize with and trust and have, like, I want to do a whole podcast on ethics alone. Because it's like emotional heart surgery when you take a large dose. And it's just be ready.
Yeah, but so okay, this is interesting because I am in internal conflict on this topic a little bit, or conflict. So when you say yes, the Western clinical way, it's very sterile, it's very differentiated. There is of course a reason for that, because like you said, if you want to scientifically go after something, you need to isolate, you need to have double randomized tests, all the things. So in a way, I get, like, I empathize with your argument that makes it too sterile, and that makes it extremely cold and dead in a way. So I understand that argument. On the other hand, I like the inner scientist in me that loves that concept, because this is amazing. Now you're just fully A/B testing what works and what doesn't work in actual sensory reality, right? So that is just great. And also the fact that we are doing it this way right now, we as a species, we are now integrating in a certain way psychedelics into our society. That is also for me just extremely fascinating, because what we are doing on a collective scale, we are taking these tools, like I don't want to say divine tools, I don't want to go with all these terms, but we are taking these extremely potent tools, and we are now on a collective scale starting to integrate, to understand, to research, and to provide this to our species members. So that's amazing in a way. Now it gets to like the core of the issue, and that is where I think we can debate on a little bit. I'm not sure, but what I see there is that there is, from the woo end, the woo spectrum, again with no negative judgment, but like let's say the more the spiritual inclined community, they think, yeah, what's happening here is that's just not good. That's just very bad, because now, like, the capitalistic structures, they are now absorbing, they are extracting this value, and it's now becoming a tool of capitalism in a way. I agree with that. So I think that is true. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because now we get to something fun, and this is just my personal hypothesis, is that these tools are so powerful and they will give you a certain experience that it will show you a, a an alternative way, a new way of looking at things. And I think that in the process of unfolding from the current systemic structures, this is an extremely powerful way to do that. This is a great way, because net on a collective scale, if more and more people will see this, or just like the people that are, they are in certain positions to have influence, that is just amazing. So uh, it gets a bit fuzzy in also my argument, because now I'm also introducing the fact that there are big pharma companies that want to exclude the mystical experience from the psychedelic, so from the substance, so that now it gets even more weird. So now you're going to have psychedelics that don't give you a trip or a psychedelic experience. um, will this work, yes or no? Yeah, I see your shake your head. I sense within myself some biases against that. Like, this seems to me like completely, utterly ridiculous. That's my internal reflex response. But on the other hand, what if it works? What if that actually works? What if we can heal people with a molecule, like that is derived from a psychedelic, but that doesn't give you a trip? Like, how the hell would that work? And what if that happens? That for me seems a little bit like the doom scenario. But okay, enough speculation. Like, just shoot on that.
I think I'm not a scientist. I I suck at math, chemistry, physics. I'm not that person, but I find that two very important components of science are the quality of the question and the tools available. And not enough people are asking the right questions or keeping the right questions alive, because the the really good questions never have complete answers. They're a process, and we just don't have the tools to measure. And so, when you're talking to a woo person, they talk about ritual, which we understand has so much value and importance and is foundational to any society. If you want to talk to um, um, a really productive person, they would call it discipline, or routine. It's the same bloody thing. But when you start to extract a certain thing into silos and segment them and repurpose them and rebrand them, I think more is lost on the cutting room floor than we understand. And that's, and conventional science does not reassure me in any way. So, again, aside from emergency treatment, conventional medicine does not reassure me in any way. James Nestor, who wrote the book on breathing, he's that journalist. He wrote that book called Breath. He was astounded as to what he discovered, and it's this thing that we have to do every like minute or so. Like, it doesn't take very long before things go sideways, and yet none of us know how to do it, including his father-in-law, who's a pulmonologist. His pulmonologist father-in-law didn't understand the consequences of mouth breathing and what they are. And medicine is so siloed that I have to take the macro view. And that's why I'm proudly untrained and I'm proudly rebellious. And that's why I really speak to our community in a way to plant the seed and to make them remember the questions, so that when they face their doctor, or they face their family member or their friend or even themselves, am I using this correctly? Why am I using this? How am I feeling? Am I sure this is not the right dose? What metrics am I using? Because we're just outsourcing everything to people in authority, people that we assign authority to. And that cannot continue to, it just doesn't work in our favor. Someone that has seen you for 15 minutes this year does not get to tell you how you feel because you live in your own body. And so there's due diligence, there's research, there's a lot of work that has to go in. But what choice do you have? This is the vehicle you're in. Take control. And extracting and siloing and psilocin and IV mushrooms. I mean, I find that term so deeply offensive. And I get it on a research level, but the questions have to stay alive.
Yes. Okay, again, there's so much to unpack there. Things I fully agree with, things I'm thinking, do I agree with that? So yeah, I think that this is why our conversations always are pretty valuable, because in one end I want to go along with the entire argument. Right? The the theme of self agency, of ownership, that deeply resonates. I agree with that. However, I also think we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? I don't think all science is bad or all medicine is bad at all. Like I'm a very big proponent, actually, in many ways, of Western medicine or Western science. I love it in so many ways. I think it's an extremely powerful and extremely successful tool of human consciousness that we have created. Right? I think it's amazing, but it has its time and its place. And the fact that what you're saying, yeah, someone who's you see for 50 minutes a year cannot tell you how you should feel. Yes, I agree with that. But if there is a need to see that person, then authority is not always bad, right? Sometimes you should listen to that person. So I'm trying to find the common ground here, because you say I'm proudly untrained, and also I resonate again, like, because what you say is like I am not clinging to like the specialist way, in one way that I follow this particular path and I have excluded everything else, because we live in an age of hyper specialization. So I love that too. You take a more generalist approach. So that I resonate with that. But on the other hand, we also do need specialists in certain fields, in certain areas, right? So I'm just playing around here, like like what do I truly believe? What you're saying, what do I resonate with? There's just so much there, and I think it's so important that we do indeed what you say. We stay true to ourselves. We take that self agency. We take that self ownership, but we don't reject everything that we're standing on. That's not how progress works. We take still what is working, and we integrate that too, and we keep that, but we don't say like, okay, everything what happened before us, that we throw away.
No, not at all. And, the muscle that is called upon is discernment. And that's why you need to do research, because what you're hearing as feedback from your doctor, your professional, whatever, if you've done your research, you're like, oh, okay, cool. I have discernment. I have context. I trust how I feel. I haven't deferred the entirety of the opinion to you. And that discernment, it's not rebellion. It's more like Jamie Wheel talks about open sourcing. You're just open sourcing the
Mm.
information, and that's what I'm talking about. And open sourcing it means that each individual has to read their own T's and C's, right? Who reads the T's and nobody? But if you hear like there's a thing on the news that WhatsApp is, changed their privacy, then you just take somebody's word for it. Well, we can't keep taking people's word for it when it comes to our health, our mental health, psychedelic substances, all of that stuff. We really have to engage in a way that, is this right for me? Have I considered this properly? Do I have all the information that I need? He's telling me this. My gut feeling is get a second opinion. Get a second opinion. I'm not saying fire him. I'm just saying, like, move in the world like you're the only person that has your self-interest at heart, because actually you do, especially in the medical context. No one has your self-interest at heart more than you do. They just don't.
Fair point. Okay.
And that's the discussion that I try and have with people, and I'll use that even to pay, because we've discussed this before. I'm going to page Dr. Fadiman, and I want to write about this. I think the definition of microdosing as it currently stands is incomplete, because at the moment it's something along the lines of a tenth or a 20th of a recreational dose of a psychoactive substance like psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, you know. And it's like, that's one part of it. But the other part is the intermittent and short term use for overall well being or self improvement. And I think that those two aspects are missing. I spoke with a coaching client this morning, and he was like, well, I don't think I'm taking enough. I'm taking 1 gram of truffles and I'm not feeling anything. And I'm like, well, let's go through what you think you should be feeling. That's a very subjective thing. Let's define what you think you should be feeling. Let me point out some landmarks in your life where this may or may not be happening. They could be green light indicators that, oh, maybe something is changing at a very, very low lying level, potent but subtle, as I like to call it. And if you start to see them, it's like the red car. And it's like, okay, cool, I got the red cars now. And then by the end of the call, he's like, I actually don't know if I'm taking the right dose or not. Maybe it's just perfect for me. I'll continue to consider what you've said. Perfect. That's all I ask. And it's always about what are your metrics? What are you testing for? What is the feeling you're after? What do you think you're going to get? What do you think that having that feeling is going to get you ultimately? It's all very subjective. And it's work, especially when you're not used to thinking like that, but I kind of can't help it.
How would you then update the definition? Because that's how you started.
Yeah, so it's the subperceptual dose, um, taken intermittently on a short term basis for improved well being.
Okay, so what is added there is the intermittently aspect.
Intermittent short term
Yeah.
for well being. And the reason for that is, like you said, you came in to do, to microdosing for focus. We have a lot of boomers in our community that have taken large doses of psilocybin and LSD in their younger years for fun or for whatever, because that was a sign of the times. And then they come and talk to us and they're like, it never occurred to me to use this substance at a smaller amount to optimize my life. That blew their mind.
I'm guilty.
But this is the thing. And this is the point I'm trying to make. And that's why I feel that that definition is incomplete. Because even those that know how to surf the big waves and take the hero doses, they're like, hang on, you mean I can take this and not have road rage and just take a little bit? It's like, try it. See what happens.
There are times I got a bit more road rage, so you need to be careful with that one. This is actually quite interesting. So I love that updated definition. So basically, what you're saying is, right now the current definition really is geared towards the dosage amount,
Yes.
but it doesn't include the actual method, the practice, that you don't do this for a prolonged period of time. You don't do this for 3 years in a row. No, you do it for 6 to 8 weeks, then you take a break, and then maybe a few months later or a year later or 2 years later you do another cycle. But it's not
And
something
you
that you
don't do
do
it
on a
every day.
continual basis.
You don't even do it every day. Intermittent.
Cool. Okay, so uh, when it comes to doing it every two, we're on the topic of protocols right now, right?
Mm.
So what has changed for you there in when it comes to microdosing protocols? Of course, like, but a protocol is, to highlight that for the listeners, is just the schedule you use for your microdosing journey. So let's say you just mentioned Fadiman. The Fadiman protocol is 1 day on, 2 days off. Then the Stamets protocol is 4 days on, 3 days off, or in some cases 5 days on, 2 days off. So it's that there are certain rhythms in your cycle for you to consume your dose. And just to briefly get it back to me is like what I've seen within my own setup is that in the beginning, like 5 6 years ago when I started, no strict protocol. I was just doing it on the go. I was a complete amateur in this regard. I would have these tabs of LSD and I would you know have these scissors and then put a little bit in distilled water and I would just go for it. That was completely not the right way to go, of course, but I had to learn along the way how it was done. Then only after a year or two, I started reading into it more. And okay, you have the Fadiman protocol, and you do it 1 day on, 2 days off. So I started to be more disciplined in that. Along the way, I then grew more toward a more intuitive protocol, as that is called, and I just felt internally when it felt right for me to take a dose. That after a while got a little bit too non-structured, so I then noticed I'm just taking maybe one dose a week or maybe two a week, and it's for maybe a few months. So I was not really like set. So I kind of got back to now my own protocol, which is on the weekends, so Saturday, Sunday, and then on Wednesday. Because for me, that really allows me to, when I have no meetings, no calls on the Saturday or Sunday, to really be within whatever I want to do with myself, with in nature, to really read or study. I love that sensation, that feeling. So I see an entire progress in my protocol development in a way how I follow that. What are you seeing? Because you are actively coaching people, you are in the community. Like, what's going on there? Because I'm seeing some interesting things also about taking lower dosages in following protocols. Like, what's going on right there in your experience?
Well, I compare protocols to, you've heard me say this before, to chicken soup. We all know what it is, but we all have a different recipe, and the recipe can change over time. And so there is no hard and fast way when we approach, and I'm quite proud of this when it comes to Microdose Pro. I really love that we do talk about protocols and we do talk about the sweet spot. And I make sure that it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just we're all going to start from the same position. So what Fatty Man did in 2012, 2011, whatever it was, he sent out a survey globally and he said to people, he's like, right, if you have access to mushrooms, we don't like, that's not what this is about. But if you do have access, how do you use them? Ish. That's basically the question. And over 1,100 people from 59 countries responded. And with all these responses, the pattern that he saw was 2 to 3 times a week. And so that became the Fadiman protocol. And they typically did it for about 6 to 8 weeks. So it wasn't him dictating to the industry. It was him like, oh, this is what the citizen scientists typically do. Now, that is, you take it in the morning, you have it with some food, and, you can either have set days or flexible days, depending on your schedule. And that's all fine and dandy. And then, of course, there's Paul Stamets, who's out in his own little forest where, sometimes it's 4 to 5 days and he kind of throws in some lion's mane and niacin in there. And that's a more advanced protocol. I always make sure that I tell people this because it's not really comfortable, very beneficial, but it's not where you want to start. So, moving on from Paul Stamets, when it comes to his stuff, there's stacking. So you can combine functional mushrooms with psilocybin, which is really, really interesting and beneficial in its own way. And then, of course, there's the routines. Are you doing a nightcap? Are you doing an intuitive? And over the years, I've ended up being more of a nightcap person. So for me personally, I prefer taking my psilocybin dose before I go to bed. And I noticed this with creatives as well. Um, a lot of creatives seem to like doing that. But for people like you, that makes you too alert, and taking it at night is not your vibe.
No, no, I won't sleep.
Yeah. So for some people, it's great because if you have a little bit of nausea or anxiety when you take your psilocybin dose and you don't mind sleeping on it, by the time you wake up, you're winning. So, but microdosing also involves a tremendous amount of responsible experimentation. And so there is no hard and fast rule. And it's important that people continue to experiment because we continue to learn. Because if we didn't hear from our community that, like, hey, I'm not feeling so depressed, and hey, I'm feeling more grateful, and hey, it's like helping me beyond focus and productivity, we wouldn't know. So it's important to keep experimenting and to keep the conversation going. But protocols can be varied. Some people dose twice in one day, which I don't recommend, especially not to newbies. But if during your journey you figured out that that's what works for you, that's what works for you. And so there's a lot of protocols out there. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. It's worth discussing, and the sweet spot is going to change. You know, we've noticed that as individuals, and we notice that in our community. Your first cycle, maybe you're taking zero 0.8 grams of truffles for the first 6 to 8 weeks. You take a break, you come back to it, and you only need 0.25. There's nothing wrong with that. The number doesn't actually matter as long as you know how to find your space. That's all that matters. And I use the analogy of like falling in love. How do you know you're falling? You just know. And then when you look back, when you've done it a few times, you're like, maybe I wasn't in love there, but I know it this time. You know, it's a
They speak from experience.
the single life. Um, so it's a felt sense that you develop with time, that you have to experiment. There's very little words in the English language that we can convey. Um, so yeah, that's my story on protocols and sweet spots. It's a lot of words because we're
No,
really grasping.
no, thanks for clarifying that, because for me, as someone who wants to, put everything into little boxes, and to, have strict rules and shit, so like that's my own work to work with. But when we started with Microdose Pro, then people were saying, oh, I want to start the microdosing at night. And we were like, no, you cannot do that. It's like, don't do that. It's not the rule. And the people were like, yeah, I'm gonna start microdosing twice a day. Like, no, don't do that. We were like very strict. And then the the comments came in also in Discord and stuff, and on Facebook, and people, they say, oh, it's been the best thing ever, like, and multiple people doing it before bed. And at one point you're just like, okay, yeah, okay, I can be very strict and don't do it, but if it works for people and they really feel amazing doing it, who am I to say don't do that? So what I'm curious about is just more like the underlying processes there that are in place, because for me, I just want to understand that there are now several people that microdose before they go to sleep, also you, what's happening there? Because it's yeah, it should have an effect, of course, for me directly, not in the sense that I want to really feel the microdose. Then it would of course be more like a mini dose or something above that. But I do get into that state of being, and that for me is like the greatest part of it. But if you're asleep, then you're not going through that state, and you wake up, and then that is already kind of gone. So maybe you have an afterglow or something like that. But I'm just very curious what's going on there, and it could be that, like you said, maybe there is some sort of neuroplasticity going on, and when you wake up, you can access that, or I don't know. But it's just so fascinating to see that people are so creative with all this stuff, and they're finding now new ways to do it. And also the concept of lowering your sweet spot after your second, third, fourth cycle or whatever, that for me is also just extremely interesting. And we, of course, we can talk in analogies and falling in love, and that's all very beautiful. But I also want to know the technical stuff, like what's happening there. Like, how is it possible that your sweet spot for like tens of people is lowering, and we get the same feedback over and over again? Like, there must be something going on there, and perhaps it's just that you are able more to recognize that feeling, and that's the reason why, or you're just training yourself in order to get into that state more naturally. I don't know, but it's along the way we're just encountering all these fascinating, not problems, but discoveries, that for me is just, it's just amazing to to research that a bit more in the future. And that's also why, Jai is more on board right now, and we're gonna try to think like, how can we ask people more for feedback, and how maybe we can do some studies. We're also now working together with a few universities, like University of Amsterdam, of Leiden, Lisbon, the Free University of Amsterdam as well. Like, there are all these master theses being done right now with our product, with truffles. It's just amazing to see that, right? To see like what the hell is going on there, and how are people actually using this in daily life, and what are the actual numbers there, what are the results. It's just fascinating. Anyway, that was my question on protocols. Do you have anything else on the list?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the thing I said about, tools, right? We just don't have the tools for neuronal density. And, why am I talking about neuronal density? Well, because of, obviously neuroplasticity, but when you look at mycelium in its natural habitat, whatever that means, if you look at the structure that it makes, if you think about the fact that it holds the soil together. If you think about the Tokyo experiment where they mapped out the subway system in Tokyo and optimized it with the use of mycelium, the more dense the connections, that's why we're doing it. So then to assume that's what happened when that's why we're doing it is not so far-fetched. And so the dosage would not have to be so high because the bulk of the optimization has been carried out. And why not? Right? And when it comes to taking it at night, I don't know, maybe we need to ask Matt Walker from, the sleep guru, but maybe there's something happening in the way we process memory, emotions, the goings on of the day in the dream wave states. So because we're in a waking state, our brain is obviously, certain components are active, and that's it's got its own mechanism. But when we're in a dream state or in a sleep state and we're under the influence of psilocybin, what happens? And for me, it just feels like a cleaner defrag. So for us PC users from back in the day, when you like defrag your hard drive, when like the data is just thrown, it used to be my most satisfying thing from back in the day, like in 2007 when I used to have a PC. You just defrag your hard drive and it just takes all the data and just cleans it up, and there's no clutter, and it's just everything is siloed and segmented in its place. And that's what happens in our sleep, right? We know that. That's how it manages short-term memory and emotions. And so then you throw psilocybin in there during those waves. I don't know what happens. I don't mind it, but I don't know what happens.
This is actually like, I'm just thinking this is so cool. We can already perhaps do some very basic research on this, because again, this is a very bold hypothesis, right? So
Really?
I love it. Like you're throwing out all this stuff. Yeah, there's no claims here, but this is something we should test, or just like science should test. But what you can do, like I track my sleep with an aura ring, so I check my REM sleep and my deep sleep on a daily basis, and it tracks your heart rate, your HRV, all those things. But you could quite easily, because it's quite accurate, test with a large group to have your default base, your average, your mean on REM sleep or deep sleep or something like that, and then with psilocybin,
Mm,
and see how it affects. Because I've noticed with alcohol, for example, even if I have one glass of alcohol, like I can instantly see my sleep metrics, they go down tremendously. Especially my HRV, my heart rate variability, just goes down like that.
interesting.
So you could
That would be
also
a
do
fun experiment.
yeah, that's cool, right? Something like that could be that could be done. Not that's not too complex. Anyway, just a lot of brainstorming. It like I love it. That's a good one. Maybe we should make a Discord group on this or something like that.
Yeah, because a lot of people have those O-rings. A lot of people have health trackers, and it's easy. And I'm sure they'd love to get involved and just, get people to participate, because that's the ultimate point of this conversation. It's just a different way to engage with our community. Like and subscribe and comment. More than anything, comment. Yeah, because we just love to engage with you guys. And there's a lot of ways that you can engage with us. But, if there's anything here that you want to explore, you know, do that, and so we can have the conversation.
Sure, but this whole like I'm not sure if you're wrapping up. Like I have more
Yeah,
time, but
yeah,
like this
no,
whole
go for it.
okay, cool, great. But this we can. There's no time limit. But this whole thing about biomarkers, that is so important, because what's happening now is like, okay, we are journaling when we are microdosing, right? And we say always it's so extremely important to journal, to set your intention, all those things. But what you really want, and because it's so hard to do good research to microdosing. Also, when you hear Huberman and Card Harris and those folks talk about it, yeah, you just you see that why it's so hard, because it takes a lot of financial power, because you have to track so many people over such a prolonged period of time. They
Control
are in
groups and
control groups, they're in their default state of life, so you cannot have them in the lab, because how you're going to do that? Because the whole point of microdosing is you are integrating that practice into your daily habits. So if you're going to sit at a research center in a lab for like 3 days, that's not really a good baseline with your default life. So it's so hard to do that. Now, I think Carhart Harris, he shared in the recent podcast with Human that there is some New Zealand study that is very promising, that showed some good results into microdosing. It hasn't been published yet, so I'm looking forward to that one. But just the the concept of microdosing is hard to measure. Now, I was thinking, what if we use specific biomarkers, like for example with Aura rings, with Apple watches, with Garmin, or how all these things are called. Like, what if we use the tools that are readily available right now? Because this health tech is also rapidly evolving. What if we can find some of the actual biomarkers that are changing? And I've had some conversations with people, and some people even say like, yeah, you can even check on a microdose day how far you have walked from your house compared to a regular day, right?
mm,
Those kind of things. So there are quite some interesting hard numbers that are possible to track. So of course, very early stage, but this would be an amazing area to explore. And you have, of course, the quantified citizen app, but this is, I think, more survey based, so it's more on personal questions. Then you have also the study that was recently done by Paul Stamets, was involved in that, with the nature study, that they checked microdosing seniors, and they were tapping on their screen, and they found some significant improvements in tap speed. So that was when they were on the Stamets stack combined with lion's mane and niacin. A lot of fun things, or a lot of interesting things are happening. So we need to think a little bit more outside the box here. How can we find some actual results for microdosing? So some hardcore numbers, right? If we also have that, if when that comes, that would be amazing, because then we can also present the scientific community, or just the Western community, like, hey, here is what's going on, and that would be just, yeah, that would be great. But and again, like, it's thinking, what are the ways to do that? That for me, it's right now, it's something I'm thinking about a lot.
look, again, I always talk about metrics and context. Metrics and I should make a t-shirt. It's like, what metrics are we looking at? What are we basing it on? And we can, point in a general direction and say, okay, HRV, sleep quality, kind of that way. But what are we also learning that we don't talk about nearly enough, that I try and keep as a very significant topic? It's women's health. And why is women's health important? Because when a woman's health is, and particularly when it comes to PMS or whatever, it's an inflammation trigger. The mood swings and the bloating and the this and that and the other thing. And it's interesting how psilocybin can reduce inflammation in just the right way, to the point where we found out by accident. A lot of women say that, hey, I did mushrooms recreationally, and like, something's different. Or I went to microdosing because I'm trying to do the thing at work, and now something is different in my body. I don't have XYZ issue and so we can point towards the general direction of HRV, but ultimately we don't know necessarily what metrics we're going to measure until we get more conversations from people. And like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that those two, like you said, how many steps have you taken today? Sure, that could be an interesting correlation. I mean, we're not talking about absolute causation, but we're just talking about very interesting and relevant correlations.
Yeah, fully agreed. That is the most, one of the most interesting aspects right now that I am looking into. Like, okay, how can we indeed find the metrics, and what are the metrics that we can consistently measure that will give us some objective data there? Okay, I think we can wrap that one up. You gave me some homework. I'm curious what that was about.
Homework is just I like to be the go-between in terms of what I think the community wants and how to get it for them. And and I think the community is very interested in who you are and what makes you tick. And the best way to find out who a person is by what they're reading. So what's on your bookshelf?
Oh, okay. There's a few books right there. Right now, I'm currently reading the big one. So I used to only read one book at a time, but I have a friend, Zoe Langdon, who I do a separate podcast with, and he said, "No, you have to start reading several books at the same time because then you have like divergent and thinking, and you have like you can connect ideas from different books." Right now, there is two books on my desk that I'm reading. I just started this one, "The Way of the Psychonaut." This is
Nice.
from Stan Grof, famous psychedelic and LSD researcher.
Yeah, that's a
This
classic. I haven't read it though.
Yeah, it's relatively new actually. It's
Is
from
it?
2018, I believe, and there are two volumes. I like it. It's kind of like a good encyclopedia format. So it's a history, and it goes to like depth psychology and more like the perspectives on psychedelics and what it can mean also from a spiritual perspective. It really goes to the depths, and that's what I like. And the second book I'm reading, and this is a bit more out there. This is Be Here Now from Ram Dass, or Richard Alpert, as he used to be called before that. This is it's just amazing. I am right now on a Ram Dass marathon, so
You're
the,
binging hard.
yeah, the way my mind works is I just binge like crazy on one or two thinkers when I found them, because I want to extract everything, what they've written, or what they said, their speeches, those kind of things. And it turns out that Ram Dass, I got familiar with him like a few years ago, but then it was too early. It didn't connect quite yet. I was like, oh, this guy has something to say. There's some truth in that. It's nice, a little bit like Alan Wattsy. I was okay. It's cool, but I didn't pursue it back then. But now I stumbled upon his book and I was reading it. I was like, that it just clicked, like, so the when the student is ready, the master will appear, in a way. With
Mhm.
like when your own predisposition is in such a state that you are ready to receive a message. That in this case was definitely true, because now every day I listen to one of his lectures, and he has so many, and it just it's, for me, it's medicine to the soul at this point. So I'm not really doing any psychedelic adventures or therapy at the moment. I haven't done psychedelics for over half a year now, and it's just the old school way, just some teachings and books and that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm reading right now. And yeah, you should also ask this to the other founders, to Gino, to Kai, and also to Jai. I think that would be amazing to get a bigger or a better understanding of who they are. That's of course it's yeah, I agree with that. It's really great for the community to get
Books say
insights
so
into
much
that.
about a person. It absolutely says so much about a person. And I'm curious, what would you say is the one thing you got from Ramdas this time that you would not have got before?
Okay, we can now go. We have no time constraint, but we can go deep. I'll try to do it briefly. No, what I think is the main thing I'm getting from him, in a way, is that, of course, his main message is be here now. And that's also what Alan Watts I got from him. It's just the hack is just to be in the present, because future and past are an illusion, and if you live in the future, you're not living in the current moment. Fair enough. So the main lesson is always be try to be present in the current moment. But I think that's not the core message I'm getting from him at this point. What I'm getting from him, and which is quite healing, is that there is this underlying pattern that you he phrases it so easily. He says you either go like "Unk," or you go like ah, right? And it's like even in the book he writes "unk" or "ah," right? And it's a form of it's a way of saying that attachment can manifest in different ways. So when you go like "Unk," then there is like this inner
Contraction.
like contraction. There is this resistance, and when you go like, oh, there is a release. You surrender. And I think that is the core message right now that I'm getting from him is is the concept of surrendering, because I'm also exploring this more in my daily practice in the past few months. It's just surrendering to the worldly things, to whatever happens. And it's also when you encounter something that it would in daily life in general would give you a contraction, just try to surrender to that. And that it's extremely hard work, but like sometimes you're just getting into a fight with a partner, or you're just something is frustrating you beyond measure, but it's trying to recognize that moment, and then oh, to try to surrender into that, and try to see if you can surrender into that. And I'm also doing a lot of yin yoga right now, a lot of stretching,
Mm.
and that is the same sensation. It's like surrendering into that pain, into that mode of being, and that is extremely hard and painful for me, because I'm definitely not a yin person. So this is to do this for a few months. It's going. It's well, man. It's hardcore inner work, but it's great. It's good. It's good to do it. So I would say that's the core message I'm getting right now, and yeah, that helps me a lot.
And it's that quote. It's that Tao Te Ching quote that you hate. Nothing needs doing and nothing is left undone.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it, but
But
yeah, yeah.
it's like that's what yin yoga is, because you're like, okay, but you're holding the pose for 5 minutes. You're doing nothing. And I'm like, no, I'm busy dying. Okay.
Mm.
Like I've been in pigeon pose, my hamstring for five, like there's a lot happening right now.
There's so much trauma in me that I didn't even know that existed. It's like holy crap. I've been doing this trauma release exercise well through a connection of yours in South Africa. It's the same kind of sensation, right? It's like there's so much going on, but it's yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So even if it looks like, nothing is being done, more is happening than you might realize.
Yeah, and that's just the surrendering concept, right? So it sounds sometimes crazy, like like I have to get this idea after like 32 years of being alive, and only now I'm finding out, oh, you can also just surrender into life, right? You don't have to force. And that's the core of everything that I'm basically reading at the moment. It's to progress into more a state of that being, right? And that is just that is also part of my practice of the way. And that's also why I said, okay, I'm not going to do any psychedelics at the moment. I'm gonna pick up microdosing shortly again in a few weeks probably. And for me, that felt good right now. And here, to get it back to microdosing, like I thought, okay, perhaps I can make my or amplify my practice right now more with microdosing. But also I thought, I really went in as like, no, I want to also do it right now, just clearly no microdosing right now, right? Just like go through it by myself, and try to integrate those lessons I've learned from past experiences, see if I can do it also without microdosing. And that for me was right now the not so much a challenge, but just the path that I decided to took and or to walk. And yeah, it feels great.
But that's a very intuitive decision, would you not say?
Yeah, but it took. But
'Cause
here's
you
the thing.
know when you want, you know when you need it, and you know when you don't. Because we have this discussion all the time. Because you're like, oh, I'm not so intuitive. I think you're probably more intuitive, but you just like again labels, metrics. Like, how are you packaging it? Because
Yeah,
you
but
could have microdose, but you chose not to, and that is an interesting thing.
yeah, because in a few ways, or in some ways, I would say I know that with microdosing it would have been easier probably as well. And I wanted to see, because I've done that path a few times, to see if I can take those lessons and to integrate it in my default state. That is the thing. And so I needed to meditate on this for a while to say, okay, how do I actually feel right now? And do I want to go for a protocol, for a cycle at this time? And I thought about it for a few moments. And no, we're not going to do that at this point, this point in time. But probably in a few weeks, then I feel now I'm getting ready for it again, and I feel I want to like this extra boost, then I go for it.
So is it fair to say that you want to, again, use the word integrate, but from a baseline rather than an altered state?
Yes, again, these are all just tools, right? So microdosing, psychedelics, these are all tools. And for me, the end goal, or if there's an end goal, if you want to phrase it like that, but the optimal state of being is to be in that state. And if you're really trained, you can go to that state easier. And I'm not there yet at all. Like I'm definitely not at that point. But it's like also, yeah, it's work in progress. It's amazing. Let's have some work in progress.
It's a life's
So
work, is what it is.
it is indeed a life's work. So what are you reading?
So I'm Rick Rubin's book, which I was so excited to receive, and he's the rabbit hole I'm currently down. I've spent a lot of time looking into Sadhguru. I can literally predict what he's going to say before he says it. I've watched all the things. And now it's Rick Rubin's turn. And he is just magic. He's absolute magic. And to take a page out of his book, I absolutely love when he says that he's not a musician. He doesn't know anything about music. He doesn't even know how to operate any of the technology. All he is a proxy to remind people who they are. And I find that to be vital, as anyone that wants to participate in society as a way of serving. You know, I don't, I'm allergic to the term healer. I've kind of like softened to the idea of coach, but all of these titles of like, oh, I'm going to, be this person on this hierarchy for you and catalyze it for you is so out of tune for me. And the way Rick Rubin just kind of points stuff out. And he's like, that was really honest. That resonated. That's interesting. And when I coach people, and I coach people whether they like it or not, yourself included, probably. I just, and it's the same conversation. Is it working? What about that? Notice, you can do it with a friend. When someone tells you something and you see that they're all lit up, just tell them, have you noticed how this lights you up? Pointing stuff out is how I work with people. And I call it process optimization rather than goal oriented, processes, in the sense of when you have plants, you mind the soil, the air, and the sun. And then the fruits and the flowers are a really nice byproduct of the process. And so that is much more satisfying when you're constantly engaging in your life's work in a process. And then the fruits come and the flowers come, and it's a lovely surprise. And you actually don't even have to worry about a dopamine crash of like being, the gold medal syndrome of like, okay, great, I won the gold medal. Now what? I sold my company for $400 million. Now what? When you're process based, it's always, there's something else to tweak, there's something else to learn, there's something else to improve, there's something else that is keeping you constantly engaged in flow without necessarily a horizon, without a peak. Because if you know anything, if the student has learned anything, is that it's a cycle between, at one point you're a student, the master comes, you become the master, you plateau, but you best be sure you're going to be a student again. That being a master is a season. Long may it last. It is not a permanent state of affairs. Because your time back as a student will happen, and that's the school of life. That's just, and it's like, how do you cope? Sadhguru says, when you're a surfer, you want a tsunami, you want 100-foot wave because you know how to surf. And so we just reminding people that they have intuitive knowledge, intuitive intelligence, intuitive gut feelings They just need a little bit of a reminder. And I like to feel that I'm, that buddy system with a little bit of experience that will just point things out and remind you more than anything that this whole thing, this simulation we're just in a sandbox. We're in a sandbox.
Are we going into that direction?
We can, but
that might be a different episode altogether.
don't make me send you YouTube links. People are saying it. Don't make me.
Yeah, oh, I know. No, I love what you just said. Like the process focus. In a way, it's the same. Like Ram Dass said, "Be here now." It's like being in the moment. It's the same as focusing on the process, because it's always now. It's always the process. That is the goal in itself is not the goal. It's so beautiful when you just think about it like that. But yeah, I love that. Okay, this is it's more fun than I anticipated. It's great.
Yeah,
These
thanks. That's a backhanded. That's a Dutch compliment if I've ever heard one.
no, I meant like you said like I have homework for you. So now there's just like a negative attachment or link with when
Well,
I get
that's your
homework. So
trauma. Yeah, I don't know.
that's my own trauma. Yeah. So this this is more fun homework than I've ever had. Anyway, no, like just I think before we go into like another hour of loophole, I think maybe we're already one past the 1.5 hour mark. We should also save some for next episodes. Um, I just had one question for you, and that was, now that you've been a microdose coach, also with Microdose Pro for over 3 years already, what, because I'm sometimes joining the workshops, and there's just so many cool things happening there, and such beautiful stories. But what would you say that really sparks out there, that really jumps out, like in the past 3.5 years? Do you have like one example?
It's all the little mundane stuff, and I think I kind of get a little bit weary of the ta-da moment, but it's the little stuff. I always talk about the lady that said her cat likes her again, which is, which I think is amazing, right? Because that's such a cat thing, right? They scan your energy, and she's like, "Wow, my cat likes me." It's fantastic. That is great news. You know, um, when people say, this one lady, she said how her and her husband were microdosing for whatever reason, and he's just, not only is he drinking less, but he's better to her. And she kind of alluded that there was a little bit of aggression in the dynamic that has since dropped. And it's like, that's so great. And somebody that's microdosing at night, an artist, and he's like, I haven't picked up a paintbrush in over a year. And now I'm, playing around again. It's those real little moments that really make the butterfly effect. That's really where it matters. It's really where it matters. And it's great that they noticed it, because it happens much more than people realize. And you just gotta notice the red car. It's there. So as I say, microdosing is working based on strangers, babies, and animals. Strangers will smile at you more. Babies are like completely, fascinated by you, and animals seem to be attracted by you. It's really, really interesting. And I've noticed it a lot in my life that when I microdose, especially if I microdose in the daytime, people are like, hey, and I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Well, it must be working for me. I have 3 dogs right now that are looking through the window for food, so I think that's also a sign to wrap up a little bit. But no, thank you so much for, yeah, that was beautiful. I love that part as well. So j- you have to be able to see the red car, to notice the red car. Couldn't have ended it any better.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to end it by saying, as you know, I've been in a lot of industries and I've worn a lot of hats. And I always call you guys unicorn people, because I never really knew people like you. Like mythicals, like, yeah, whatever. Those people are not real. You guys are real. And you're such a delight to work for and with. And our community knows it, and the industry is so appreciative for everything that you do. And these conversations are a testament of the wonderful mind that you have. And I can't wait to get the other guys in on this so that we can kick the tires. But it's always such a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome. And I suck at receiving compliments. Again, I have to work on that. I learned from the Tao is just saying
Yes.
thank you and you're welcome.
Yeah.
So
Accept gracefully and don't talk back.
accept it.
Very good. Good.
Great.
Awesome. Till
See
the
you
next
next time.
one. Peace out.
Bye bye.